Welcome everybody, my name is Montserrat and I will be presenting to you guys about an article called Manufacturing Consent by Edward and Noam. It was published in 1988 and this work really just goes into how the mass media operates. At the heart of manufacturing consent lies a propaganda model which Edward and Noam developed to explain the behavior of the mass media. This model identifies 5 filters that affect the content of the news. Those are ownership, advertising, sourcing, flag, and anti-communism. I will be going over each and every one of them. Okay, so we have ownership first, and this just refers to the control and influence exerted by large corporations or over various media outlets. This includes newspaper, television channels, radio stations, and digital platforms. What this does is that a small number of large corporations can control the flow of information and the type of the news, the content that is reaching the public. These corporations can decide which stories are covered or how they are presented, and it potentially shapes the public's perception and opinion. This really impacts us because, potential for bias. Media content may be biased towards the interest of the owners, and it limits the public's access to critical information. Okay, so next we have advertising. It is a primary source for many media outlets, just like the previous ones I mentioned, television networks, newspaper, magazines, etc. The reliance on advertising just means that the media outlets prioritize content that attracts advertisers, which leads to content prioritization. Media companies may prioritize popular content that attracts a larger audience, which increases their advertising revenue. This impacts us because it can cause the reduced quality of journalism. The pressure to attract advertisers can lead to a decrease in investigative journalism, which are more costly and less likely to attract a broad audience. We are halfway there, and now we have sourcing. Sourcing of mass media news refers to where and how news organizations obtain the information they report. Major sources often include government agencies, large corporations. These sources can provide a stream of information that shapes news content. What this does is that the reliance of specific sources means that news organizations can depend heavily on official statements and press releases from these sources, which can lead to gatekeeping. Those who control the sources can influence what information becomes news and just what gets omitted. This really impacts us because there is, limited accountability. Relying on official sources can reduce the accountability of those in power. And, this public perception as well. The way information is sourced and presented shapes the public's perception of understanding events and sometimes just aligns them more closely with the interests of the sources rather than the public. Okay, and now moving on, we have flag. I really hope that is how it's pronounced, but what it does, it just refers to negative responses to media content that comes in many various forms, like complaints or lawsuits. These responses are typically directed to media outlets or journalists, content creators. What this does is that it works against publishing content that could provoke powerful groups, and it leads to self-censorship or content modification. Journalists may alter their reporting to minimize the risk of negative responses or prevent backlash. This impacts us because there is public misinformation. The avoidance of controversial or critical reporting can lead to a less informed public with limited access to, the truth. Okay, and lastly, we have anti-communism. Particularly during the Cold War era, it served as a dominant ideological control mechanism in Western media. It's presented as a significant threat to democratic and capitalist societies. And, it acts as a filter in media, shaping narratives and content in many ways. There's framing. Media outlets frame stories very often. There's censorship. And this impacts us because, there's biased reporting. News and information are often, one-sided, and it limits the public's understanding of complex issues. The public perception it can be, messed up. The constant portrayal of communism as a threat influences public opinion, fostering fear and distrust of any ideas associated with it.